Mr. Carpenter?
Yes, Graham Carpenter. How can I help?
Graham Carpenter is one of the most pious and generous men that Charles Reed will encounter during the events of the game The Sinking City. A veteran of the First World War, Graham would find himself returning home to a devastated Oakmont that had recently seen a catastrophic flood. Being the prince to one of the city's 3 grand families, his strong moral compass would lead him to compassion for his fellow citizens, but his father wasn't exactly the charitable type. A familial fracture which would eventually lead to drastic measures.
Look, I'm not proud of what I did. He's my father. But he was a terrible, terrible man.
The story of Graham Carpenter as we know it begins with his upbringing in Oakmont before the events of the Great War. While we don't have a large number of details about what this period in his life was like, we do know that his father would establish himself as one of the most prominent men in Oakmont and be heralded as the head of one of its great families, a title bestowed upon the most wealthy and influential people that the city had to offer. But while the Blackwoods would garner their status through industry, and the Throgmortons through academic investment, Brutus Carpenter would create his power off the back of a criminal empire. Through his young eyes, Graham would watch his father build this illicit business, questions of the morality of such actions plaguing his mind. And as he grew, it would become more and more apparent that Brutus was not a good man. A fact that would cause great friction within their relationship and lead Graham to search elsewhere for guidance, finding some solace in religion, but even that didn't satiate his thirst for purpose. A thirst that would go unquenched until in 1917, the United States would enter the First World War, Graham seeing it as an opportunity to get away from the prison of Oakmont and serve the cause.
You served during the Great War?
Yes. One of the hapless grunts at Meuse are gone.
The war would expose Graham to the cruelties of conflict. He would watch men die in front of him, but he would never succumb to the darkness. Instead, he would find his virtue in assisting his brothers in arms, being heralded as a hero both by his fellow soldiers as well as by the United States government. Honors that would come with a price, as while he was rescuing a comrade from certain death, he would suffer a mortifying facial injury. A horrifying wound that would send him to Paris for reconstructive surgery and give him a haunting visage which he would hide away behind a porcelain mask. For Graham, the war had taught him many things, and when it would end in 1918, he would return home a man with purpose. A purpose that was ever more necessary as Oakmont had recently been hit with an absolutely world-shattering flood. Water had begun to pool in the city, hundreds dead in the chaos, monsters from the depths were now roaming the decaying streets, and worst of all, his father was still operating his criminal business as usual. Brutus Carpenter hadn't changed at all in his son's absence, and with his newfound purpose, Graham could no longer sit idly by. He would turn to religion for guidance, attending the Church of Redemption, which would lead him to some very wicked conclusions. His father was a parasite on the city of Oakmont, siphoning off the city's wealth at the end of a gun barrel, and try as he might, Graham was unable to make him see reason.
Graham is too honest. And since the end of the war, he turned into a real bleeding heart. It's become a bit of a headache, actually. Of course, we've had our differences, especially about the family business, but he would never hurt a fly.
With no other recourse, and with a push from the church, the veteran would come to the realization that the only way to truly steer the city in the right direction was to kill his father and become the new head of the Carpenter Grand family. He didn't relish the idea, nor did he know if he could truly embody the position without the rightful transfer of power, but the church held the answers for both of his hang-ups, filling Graham's head with the charity he could provide in his father's absence, and telling him that they had ways of replicating identities. In emotional turmoil, he would accept the church's help, the congregation bringing Brutus into their flock with sweet songs of potential immortality, having him touch the fecund mother below the city, and creating near identical duplicates before attempting to kill the original. Brutus, or perhaps a duplicate of Brutus, would be knocked out and sent to the crematorium to be disposed of, waking up before he could be burned and escaping the facility, now paranoid of his inner circle as he tried to find out who exactly had betrayed him, a quest which would eventually see him enlisting the aid of a private detective named Charles Reed. Graham Carpenter is one of the few paragons left within this devastated city, led astray by a church who sought to leverage his compassion and create a puppet for their needs. A mission that would see the house of one of the most prominent families in Oakmont divided, as father and son both vie for control to lead the Carpenters in the direction they deem appropriate. A hero of the Great War, a devout man of faith, and a generous altruist, Graham was one of the best that Oakmont had to offer. But even he was not immune to the many sins of this city.